Good morning, blessings to everybody who's joining us via YouTube. Let's go ahead and begin with some prayer. Gracious Lord, ever since the fall, we have lost our way. We pray that you would bless us with your presence so that we may be guided into those green pastures and live with you for eternity. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're still in chapter 1 of Romans. Yeah, we're moving fast.
We're the last section of chapter 1.
Yep. We're going to try and actually get through it today.
Excellent.
So, make it to chapter 2. So, Julie, I'm going to have, let's see, I think I'm going to have you all read 26 through 32. If that's the last verse.
For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manners of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slander, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents. Foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them.
Okay, so, oops, I went to the wrong file.
How'd that work for you?
Real well, There we go. It's hard for me to do my Bible study from my sermon notes. This is continuing what we were talking about last week, where Paul says, because of the one sin is increasing. That sin leads to more sin. So they gave up. Let's see, make sure I'm using the right language here. Boy, I know what I'm looking for, now I can't find it. Because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped the creature rather than the Creator. They ended up going into even more sins. And in this case, did it again. They having given up the truth, having given up the right knowledge of who God is and who they are and the law, they are now fully engaged in their idolatry. And it just is going to keep building upon itself. In this case, what Paul highlights is a direct attack at the image of God in man and woman. If you go back to Genesis 2, when God creates humans, he creates them male and female, and that male and female creation is in the image of God. In the New Testament, it's redeemed to be the image of Christ in the church, but at its heart, though, is the image of who God is. And so he's going, well, they chased after the lie, they worshiped the creature rather than the creator, and now they express that by, well, having intercourse with the wrong people.
I was thinking the Catholic term of intrinsically disordered, I thought is pretty good.
Yeah, it's intrinsically disordered is actually a really great way of putting it. And often when I'm talking with people, that's how I will discuss it. It is a disordered relationship by its very nature, and which is what intrinsically disordered. It means it is inherently wrong. Paul puts it very politely in the giving up of natural intercourse. So the natural relationship between man and woman.
I was also with the disorder part, that like why is it wrong? It's wrong because it's inherently against how God created things to be. Not just some arbitrary reason, but
yeah, it's inherently wrong. It's not just some rule that we came up with. It's not.
that green means go, red means stop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an arbitrary rule. And so this is, Paul is basically saying, look, they're increasing their sinfulness, which is the nature of sin. It just is going to increase itself.
Solving the problems of sin with more sin.
Yeah, solving the problem of sin with more sin, yeah, that does not work out. It just keeps compounding itself. Now, trying to make sense of my own notes. Okay, so now I remember where I was going with my notes here. One of the responses to this passage, because Paul uses natural intercourse, is people will try to say, well, if you look at what happens among the animals, you can see the same thing happening, so it must be natural. We kind of touched on it last week with the penguin argument, where two male penguins might try and raise a chick, but they can't have a chick. That there is also they would cite, well, a male dog will try to mount another male dog, and they'll talk about it all throughout it happening all around in the animal with other animals. But what this is once again, instead of pursuing truth, they pursue the lie of fallen nature. Because of the fall, we cannot look to nature to determine what is right and wrong. Not completely.
Well, it's saying that we have souls and they don't be a wrong answer.
No, it's not. We alone were made in the image of God, which does mean we are different. We have the breath of life. God's Spirit breathes into us. The animals don't. So we cannot, even though we share traits, we cannot really compare ourselves to the animals. And we definitely can't take our morality from the
Well, the penguin example to me is setting an example that instead of letting a child die, to people trying to save it. Well, in that case, the male penguins, instead of letting the chick die, they're trying to save it for their species.
Yeah, you probably could make that argument, but it's still you still can't use that as
No, you can't use it to justify coupling with the wrong sex.
yeah.
Opposite, same sex.
Yeah, and the irony of this all is in making this argument, they dehumanize themselves. They make themselves less. And I say it's irony because their whole goal is to, well, I'm just as human as everybody else. Well, yes. And because you're human just like everybody else, it means you're given into sin. And it's just manifesting itself this way. But yeah, and saying, well, the animals do it. Are you saying you're nothing more than an animal? And so, Steve, what you say there with, we have a soul. We are different from the rest of creation is a valuable argument.
Because we're the only ones that got states that we were created in his image. He didn't say he created all the other animals in his image.
No, he didn't. Now, that said, I think we're going to have a little bit easier time now starting to make that argument again. Because society at large is heading away from the strict materialism that was prevalent when we were all younger. I think the new atheists, like, what's his name?
Dawkins?
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Dawkins?
Yeah.
I mean, there's Richard Dawkins.
Dawkins. Yeah, Dawkins. I was like, I thought you said Dawkins. I was like, what? Dawkins.
I mean, Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, Christopher
Harris.
Hitchens. Yeah, all those guys. Strict materialists. We're seeing what people call it the re-enchantment. The idea that there's more than just the material world. So and with a bit more of an interest in the human spirit, I think we will be able to once again make that argument that we are different from the other animals because of the soul. But anyhow, so yeah, people will look at this and go, well, he's talking about, oh, this happens in nature, so therefore it must be right. No, that's what he's not saying. He's saying this is actually going against nature, even among the animals. And when we read further into Romans, Paul's going to come out and say all of creation is fallen, and it's awaiting the redemption. Which means when we look at the natural world around us, we're going to see evidence of it. And dogs trying to mount everything that'll stand still long enough, I think, would be an example of the fallen nature of this world.
I also think that, whether it's an evil person or a good person, they all know the difference between right and wrong. And,
Yeah.
and animals don't.
To some extent, yeah. I've come across truly broken people who don't actually know the difference. But that is extreme and rare. Actually got kicked out of a trial for that. Well, didn't get kicked out, I wasn't allowed in. I was in a
He
jury.
was barred.
Yep, I was selected for the final jury pool, and so I actually got to go into the courtroom and get questioned by the judges and the judge and the lawyers. And it was a criminal competency case where they're trying to determine if the guy was mentally competent to stand trial. And the first question they ask is, do you have counseling experience? And I had to raise my hand. I didn't get asked to come back in.
You're dismissed.
Yep. But anyhow, so, all right, so they point to these degrading actions as evidence as a justification for their own degrading thoughts and actions. And that really gets back to what Paul says in that Yeah, and they gave these things up, and they were given over to their dishonorable thoughts and their degrading actions. And so he's like, so yeah, look, it's compounding itself.
So why would you want to be compared to a dog or cat or me? You know, I don't.
Well, it doesn't matter, I mean, it doesn't matter what they do, it doesn't matter what you do.
You know, I don't want to be looked at that.
Not to sound crass, but I think it's safe to say they're not in their right mind.
I mean, I love Penny and Molly, but I don't want people to compare me to them.
Yeah. I have friends who blame Disney for this. Of course, I'm not sure Disney's really truly to blame. We've been anthropomorphizing animals for a long time, giving animals human characteristics. Yeah.
You mean cartoons?
Yeah, cartoons, stories. And I laugh when they do this because so many of them really love C.S. Lewis. And do you know what C.S. Lewis did? Made animals like humans. And it's the whole Narnia series.
No.
Good books.
Yeah, they're great books. I love them, but I just think it's funny. You're yelling at Disney for making people think of animals like humans. What did C.S. Lewis do?
To be fair, though,
They don't
C.S.
like
Lewis
food.
went, that rational, there's a difference between
Yeah, he did.
mere animals and talking animals. So,
And another way that people try to respond to this, and this is just FYI, is that, well, Paul's just really talking about things that were really bad, like homosexual rape and prostitution. So he's not really condemning what they would call loving same-sex relationships. I hate to spoil their argument. Oh, I love to. But that wasn't unheard of at the time. In fact, in Roman society, romantic love between men was considered greater than romantic love between man and woman.
Well, that's twisted.
They're pagan. They worship the god that tried to have sex with everything. Zeus's mythology is not PG. And he's definitely not the loving father of the Disney movie Hercules. He's a little pervert. And it was actually a problem in Roman society. They had to pass a law to get guys to have children.
right,
Wow.
they didn't marry by 25. The highborn man didn't marry by 25 because he took his inheritance. I forget what else. I was just reading about that. Didn't solve the problem though. The highborn Romans did not have enough descendants, and that's how it went.
So Paul is not writing about just a limited thing. He is thinking about everything that is outside of a husband and wife. That they try to play word games and saying, well, this word doesn't really mean homosexual. It just means unequal relationship or something like that. No, we're pretty sure this is what it means. It's well documented. So he throws he's throwing everything out. Going, look, it just is making matters worse. And Middendorf, he's one of the main commentaries I've been using, makes the comment that as Paul says, indeed their females exchange, he's saying that the sin itself is its own consequence. And that becomes a little bit more abundantly clear when he goes, and should I put it in the right? And the men committed shameless acts with men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. So he's talking about the very act being giving the due penalty. And so the sin itself is a consequence. It's the consequence of giving up the truth for a lie. And it builds upon itself. I mean, physical harm actually happens in same-sex relationships. Even if they're, as quote-unquote, loving, they actually cause harm to each other, particularly guys.
I don't get it.
And I'm not going to go into great detail, but you can find this in health literature, that it causes actual physical problems. And I know this isn't societal du jour, but you get a lot of diseases that are kind of focused on same-sex relationships. Right? AIDS is definitely closely related. Monkeypox was really related. You notice they stopped talking about that really quick because it was almost, I say almost because it did cross over a little bit. But it was amongst gay men that it just exploded. It's all. I'm sitting there. I was reading the news, and I'm reading up about the studies about it. I was like, it's almost like somebody's trying to tell you guys to stop doing that. That's just kind of an example, like how God is using nature to show you the consequences of your sins. It shows up also in mental issues. I mean, there's a high correlation between same-sex relationships and substance abuse. A really high correlation.
To me, it almost seemed like when they came out, they didn't really come out with a cure for AIDS, but they came out with a way to combat it, stop people from dying. And as soon as they did that, it was like a lot of society just went, okay, we're good to go again. And now they're finding out they're not.
Yeah. And Paul is going to get into that to some extent in the verses that we've already read. But I'm going to get through some quotes here before we get to that. Let's see here. Dunn, he wrote another commentary. The implication is that unnatural sexual practice is its own penalty, the inevitable outcome of wandering from God, that the divinely ordered punishment for sin is to be handed over to the power of that sin, to be left to its consequences. And he has a point. When you hand somebody over to their sins, that the sins compound themselves. So I'll take another example. There is a contemporary example in that there was a man who was excommunicated from his church for the very racist comments and beliefs that he was teaching and persisted in. The guy thinks Hitler's a saint. Ever since his congregation excommunicated him, it has become worse. He went from what some people would refer to in internet lingo as edgelordy to just outright almost demonic in his statements.
They need to do an exorcism.
Yeah. It's just an example. Being handed over to his sin, it just compounded itself. Yeah, Julie, you had your hand up.
Also, that it's not a matter of do bad thing, God lightning bolts you from heaven, but that the thing you did is in fact what is hurting you. God just stops preventing it from happening.
Yeah. Julie's making a good point. What has happened is, God has pulled back his protection. He's letting this. He's no longer protecting you from your sin.
But the point is, he's not adding to what's going on. It's not some additional thing that is so unfair that God's doing and whatnot. The thing you did intrinsically is like this.
Yeah. And then Melanchthon is, with this in mind, let us also look at the older histories and at the vices of the present times, and let us consider that they are punishments either for the Cyclopean contempt of God or for idle madness. Cyclopean, as far as I can tell, refers to Cyclops.
Right, I was thinking I don't know my mythology there as well as I could, but it implies, I guess, that the Cyclops were known for rejecting the gods and probably got punished for it.
Yeah, if I recall, Cyclops rejected the gods of, I can't remember if that's Greek or...
Olympian gods, yeah.
Yeah, the Olympian gods. And yeah, they were punished for it. Melanchthon here is actually referring to a quote that we had earlier where he's talking about, if you read the histories, they're really messed up. In fact, he's like, they're so messed up, I'm not even going to bother talking about them.
I was thinking, boy, the more I read about Roman history, oh my gosh, it's a thing. It's a thing.
There's a really good book. I think it's Sexuality in a Crisis Culture. I think that's the name of it. It's through
something very like that, yeah.
CPH. The guy he's a pastor, and he's trying to make a case for actual moral sexuality and highlighting, where Roman society is really cool. And and some of the information that I've gotten for today has come from his book. He did a really good job of documenting popular literature from the time and whatnot. It's really bad. You think gangster rap is bad for how it talks about women? Read Roman poetry. Enjoy.
Let me see. It looks like it's probably sexual morality in a Christless world.
All right, sexual morality in a crisis world. I knew it was something along those lines. And then there's Chrysostom here. And Chrysostom's always great for a quote. The normal desire for sexual intercourse united the sexes to one another. But by taking this away and turning it into something else, the devil divided the sexes from each other and forced what was one to become two, in opposition to the law of God. The devil was bent on destroying the human race, not only by preventing them from populating lawfully, but by stirring them up to war and subversion against each other. Paul goes straight to the source of the sexual evil, ungodliness, which comes from twisted teaching, and lawlessness, which is its reward. For since it seemed that the ungodly would not believe him if he spoke of hell and punishment, but they might even scorn him, Paul simply states that the punishment came from the lust itself. But if they still fail to receive it, do not be surprised. Yeah, Julie.
Remind us who Chrysostom is.
Okay, Chrysostom. He's one of the early church fathers, preacher in the 3rd century,
4th century.
4th century. I'm trying to remember. I don't keep my years straight as well as I should.
I was just saying, I read it. I was reading on the 4th century, change from the pagan culture to Christian culture. I'm pretty sure they mentioned Chrysostom as one of the.
Yeah. Chrysostom literally means golden tongue. His name's actually John, but he was an exceptionally well-known preacher.
Yeah, Chrysostom is more of a title.
Yeah. Nickname. Yeah. And he's going, Paul is, look, just the lust itself is driving you to more things that are bad. And I've made the comment before, and I'll make it again, in dealing with the world, a lot of times people have to find out the pot is hot by touching it. They have to get burned before they finally realize there's something wrong. Saw this all the time with people using drugs, and they even may intellectually know using the drug is wrong. But they don't see it as the root of their problems. They don't see it as destroying their lives until it does.
Does this have anything to do with the declining populations in like USA now and Japan and
Almost
some of the other
nowhere can
countries?
be bothered to have enough kids. It feels like at some level, I don't know. I kind of, at least just personally as a pious opinion, sometimes I have wondered, right, like we've been aborting how many kids and whatnot, and we can't be bothered, right? You don't want kids, you don't get to have them.
It is a multifaceted problem. Despite what Hollywood would like to tell you, the actual same-sex population is statistically minuscule.
But I think even heterosexuals nowadays, a lot of younger ones, I mean, I've got one. I'm not having kids. I'm too busy having fun.
Yeah, like I said, it is multifaceted because that's another issue that's going on.
But not having kids is usually biblically a punishment. Like,
It is.
And I was thinking like with the Chrysostom, was it Chrysostom or here the right? Oh yeah, by the devil was bent on destroying the human race not only by preventing from combating lawfully, right? Like if you can't even be bothered to have the next generation, and we're so messed up that we think that like right, you get what you want. You don't want kids, you don't get them.
And Julie's got a point, and some points I would also say we're reaping the fruits of what we sowed years ago, where we were told kids, before you can have kids, you got to go to school, you got to get a job, you got to have a house, all these things, and so.
I missed that lecture.
What?
I said I missed that lecture.
And I had parents getting mad at me because I was telling my youth it's okay to get married at 18.
Well, my
You
son
don't
was
have
never
to
gonna
wait
have
to-
kids until then he found his wife, and he was going to have 2 to 3, and he got a boy.
I had parents getting mad at me because I was telling them, you don't have to wait to get married. A proper mindset and a determination to grow together is what you need, because nobody's actually ready to ever get married. I know it. I was what, 27 when we married.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready to be married. Julie and I have spent 20-some years now learning to live with each other. When Rebecca came along, which wasn't that much longer after we were married, about 3 years, I was not ready for a kid.
Well,
I wanted kids. I want it, but man, we got home with her, and I'm sitting there holding her and going, I gotta take care of this kid. How in the world am I going to do that? And so we're telling people, oh, you don't do it until you're ready. Nobody's ever ready.
I had a realization at 18.
Yeah.
This kid's solely depending on me. Oh, Lord, what was God thinking?
So, yeah. But I think we're reaping that. We're getting burned.
I would say, I mean, lots of governments have shown that you can reduce fertility, but I don't think any have shown that you can make it come back up again.
No, and a buddy of mine, that's one of his big things is trying to increase fertility, and yeah, about the best as he can come up with right now from the stuff in his studies. He does demographic studies. That's his job, and is that the best you can do is don't put things in the way and you have to have a societal encouraging of marriage and children.
Yeah, I was going to say that when I was traveling, working all over the world, a lot of things that I saw, like in really poor countries, in Africa and parts of Asia, people tried to have as many kids as they could because that was their retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
Someone to look after them when they got old enough that they couldn't look after themselves.
Yep.
I can understand that today. When I was 18, I probably wouldn't have, but today I can
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to reap that fruit because Social Security was built on the idea of having more kids. There's fewer kids. There's fewer people paying into Social Security. Social Security would have kept working if the baby boom had kept.
I think at some level, all of this, babies, like I don't know, all the very practical economic arguments for kids, they're kind of like downstream of why people actually have kids. I mean, because it's fundamentally either it feels like a thing to do or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because there's 3,000 reasons not to do it, and all the practical reasons in the world aren't enough to overcome those.
Yeah. And this really leads us into the next passage here, Julie. So we're jumping to 28 here. Where Paul just goes, all right, so he gave him up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. So he's like, all right, you guys are going to pursue this lie. You're going to experience what the lie means. He's pulling back his protection. And he's like, so they're filled with all manner of unrighteousness. And Paul just lists off a bunch of unrighteous things. Do not consider this a complete and list. This is a sample because it gets worse. So he's like, and so they're given over to all sorts of evil, covetousness, malice. They're full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They're gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Inventors of evil. We are finding new ways to be evil.
And I find that incredible.
Yeah, so he said, yeah, evil is just going to get more evil. And we're going to face those consequences.
I was thinking, likewise, with not having kids, fundamentally, a societal number of people increasing all the time don't think having kids is good.
Yeah.
So, we've gotten that.
Yep. We're reaping the fruits of telling people that kids are a burden.
Because, they are. So, there has to be a reason why you do it anyway.
Yeah.
While the other flip side is the world's overpopulated as it is, don't need anymore.
Yeah, which I think is probably one of the most hilarious arguments out there because we're not even close to overpopulation.
Right, but also I guess I just read that when the big book population bomb came out in the 70s, it was really huge and it inspired a lot of countries, Korea's, China's, India's, programs to reduce things. That actually, in retrospect, the world population had already peaked at the time that book came out. It was already on the way down at the point that the population bomb came out.
Yeah.
I don't know if the trends could have been noticed at the time, but in retrospect, there they were.
Yeah. And so what Paul here is just highlighting, it just gets worse. So I mean, if you're looking at society going, it's getting worse, the answer is, well, yes, it is.
I think at some level, the overpopulation thing, the fear that we can't handle it, is the assumption that God can't give us any more good. There's only a finite amount of good, and we'll be like kids squabbling over inheritance, broken up too much to support anybody, as opposed to
Yeah.
But I'm always hesitant because sometimes people are like, right, God will take care of us, so we can ruin the environment and God will sort it. We don't have to be good stewards.
If you're like me, you would have so much stuff your son tells you, I'm giving it to the grandkids. Go ahead and let the grandkids inherit it. I don't want the cost of hauling it off.
So he's look, it's gotten horrible and it's going to get worse. In fact, he goes. In fact, people are going to celebrate doing evil, and we see this in our society today. People holding up as brave and wonderful and I forget all the terms now, but you get I think hopefully you get the idea for doing wicked things. It was in the news recently, but in a sense for a good reason. Texas A&M and the Board of Regents recently voted that the Draggieland event would not be held on campus. That it was banned for its celebration of debauchery, I think is kind of the language the Board of Regents used. If you're not familiar with Draggieland, it is as it sounds. It's a drag show that would happen at A&M. Yeah, not one of their shining moments. But you listen to people reporting about it, and they're talking about how brave these individuals are.
Read books in the church.
Oh, now I remember. Because the mock that now I remember the Board of Regents language was the mockery of women is not an Aggie virtue.
I would say there's no way that they said it was just that was too old-fashioned debauchery comment. Even though that's what they thought on the inside.
But so I was like, good for you guys. I'm glad you canceled this thing. It should never have happened in the first place. But people are defending it, are talking about these brave individuals who are getting up and now making a mocking of women. They're celebrating evil.
Well, the drag queens are dressed up like, I don't know women that dress like that.
I don't either.
And, I've always seen them portrayed in movies and stuff, but they were hookers. They weren't.
Yeah, again, it's the celebration of evil. Now, in internet land, I don't know how much it spills out past internet land, you have the celebration of the Tate brothers.
Oh my gosh!
I-
Yeah.
I-
Right, it's not just liberals that are doing it.
Yeah, I know. The Tate brothers are facing trial for human trafficking, rape, child molestation.
That's the ones that just landed back over here, right?
Yes!
Right, they haven't been allowed in the U.S. because
And there's a whole group of people who are trying to hold them up as examples of manliness.
Oh yeah,
Real men don't go raping. They don't traffic women. They don't act like pimps. They don't molest children.
Well, and even if you just look at the things they're proud of doing, as opposed to the things they say they don't do, because for the record, they deny that they are actually sex trafficking or whatnot. But you look at what they do, they do celebrate, breaking the sixth commandment all the time. I was thinking Babylon Bee had a pretty darn apropos headline for this, and I'm looking it up. Not necessarily making us feel good about ourselves, but that was about where it was. Oh gosh, here we go. Right. Conservatism saved as Muslim sex trafficker brought back to U.S.
Yeah.
That seems about capture that. Right, he did convert to a Muslim to Islam because it is a more masculine religion than Christianity. And the fact that it also doesn't approve of drinking and whoring around and whatnot is in fact irrelevant, I guess, too.
Yeah.
It just looked the other way. I lived in Dubai, and I know that they had the Sheikh. They had hotels there that were nothing but prostitutes,
Mhm.
and they were for the young national men to go to, so they'd stay away from the national girls.
Yep.
Everybody knew about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a well-known fact that Dubai had the whole temporary marriage thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they really wanted to be the Vegas of the Middle East, and they succeeded.
Yeah.
But yeah, and to wrap this up, so we can actually finish chapter 1. Paul relates, and the penalty for all of this is death, and the penalty is just. We have earned our death. And before everybody goes, oh, I'm scotch-free because I'm not giving into those kind of things. Wait till chapter 2. With that, let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.